Hey, it's Luminostic in Vilcabamba, Ecuador. We've just returned from the Amazon rainforest. Some of you may have seen the short video that I made from Cascada Paraíso in the Ecuadorian Amazon. We went out there with a group from Bosque Medicinals. They are trying to raise money to support, or to purchase rather, I think 100,000 acres of rainforest in order to protect it from the Chinese mines. For those of you that aren't familiar, Chinese mines are coming in and buying up land in the rainforest at a frightening and unprecedented rate. I think they've sold 3 million acres in Ecuador and another 3 million in Brazil recently. So far Bosque has managed to purchase a couple of private tracts, and there's a larger segment that they're looking to purchase from whoever it is that you buy rainforest land in Ecuador from and protect it, so that there's no mining. So I'll put a link in the comments if you would like to support this effort. You can donate to their GoFundMe. But on the subject of ayahuasca, so I've been meaning to make an ayahuasca video for a while. I've had lots of pretty incredible experiences with this particular plant medicine. It is one of the oldest medicines in use, probably about 5,000 years. And one of the most amazing things about ayahuasca is the improbability that it would ever be discovered in the first place. Without getting too much into the technical jargon, though I'll probably make a video in the future that goes into this in more detail. It really struck me once. I had drank the medicine and I went out into the jungle just to sort of commune with the jungle and just be sort of in the forest with the medicine. And I noticed a log because I was looking for a place to use the bathroom, and it seemed wrong to sit on the log because it had an uncountable number of different species of plants and mushrooms, beetles, ants, and it just really struck me. I had sort of this vision of bulldozers sort of plowing through the rainforest, and every couple of inches they're destroying, I mean, there was many species, life forms, biodiversity is maybe the state of Kansas on this 3-inch thick, 3-foot long piece of log. So that occurred to me, and the other thing that occurred to me is that the sheer number of species of plants in the Amazon rainforest, in order for the indigenous peoples all over the Amazon basin, I think there are 72 different tribes that independently, most of them independently, figured out how to make some form of the ayahuasca brew. The chances that this would even happen are astronomically low. For one thing, both the Banisteriopsis copy vine by itself has no real psychoactive effect. It just causes vomiting. And Chacruna, Psychotria viridis, or one of the other DMT containing admixture plants, they also have no psychoactivity. It's a very complex process that occurs between the two plants in order for this medicine to become psychoactive in the first place. For one thing, DMT is not orally active. It must be smoked or injected or snorted, because there is a metabolic salt in the stomach that renders it inactive and so destroys the DMT. And if you take an MAO inhibitor, the metabolic salt itself is destroyed, which allows the DMT to become orally active, which of course extends the activity. When it's smoked, it only lasts for a few minutes. Orally, of course, the effects are much longer. And the harmala alkaloids in the ayahuasca vine also are potentiated by the DMT. The harmala alkaloids happen to be MAO inhibitors. So the harmala alkaloids destroy this metabolic salt, which allows the DMT to become psychoactive. The DMT in turn activates the harmala alkaloids, and thus we have ayahuasca. So, of course, if you're foraging in the forest looking for palatable food sources and you encounter plants that have no psychoactivity and they do make you vomit, you're probably not going to continue to experiment with these plants. So the question arises, how would this have occurred? And I think a lot of people, would dismiss this as coincidence. One of the things I hope to do in this channel is present evidence for, or explanations for, a lot of the things that we might consider supernatural or, hocus pocus, that, there's a tendency with the modern domesticated primate to dismiss anything that doesn't have a rational explanation. And so a few years back, I read a book called The Cosmic Serpent, and I can't remember the author's name at the moment. Perhaps I'll look it up and put a link in the description to this author's work. But one of the discoveries that he presented was that of the Biophoton, which is every centimeter of living tissue, whether it be plant, anything that contains DNA, basically emits these tiny little packets of light that contain information, and these bits of information can be understood by other cells. So this idea, when the indigenous people are asked how did they discover ayahuasca, and they tell the anthropologist or the ethnobotanist or whoever it is they might be speaking with that the forest told them, and the scientist kind of laughs it off and says, crazy primitives or whatever. Now we actually have a scientific basis that could explain how it is exactly that the forest is able to communicate these things with us. They use DNA and light to transmit information. And so that all struck me as very interesting and applicable. And also it's interesting, I think, as well, that this plant, that its very existence sort of substantiates the existence of telepathy, not only interspecies, but when ayahuasca was first discovered, and when I say first discovered, I mean like 1600s, Sir Walter Raleigh. There have been instances of documentation of the telepathy that is caused by ayahuasca, stretching all the way back to this diary entry from Sir Walter Raleigh, wherein a shaman told him he could know anything that he wanted by drinking the vine. And so the Sir Walter Raleigh said, then tell me something you couldn't possibly know. And the shaman said, well, your sister's dead. And of course, a week or so later, Sir Walter Raleigh received a letter that informed him of the death of his sister. There are also well-documented instances of shamans all over South America viewing, remote viewing, I guess would be the word, the Eiffel Tower, giving very accurate descriptions of street corners in China. So much so, and this is so common, there was a book by Gene Masters in Houston where they describe all of these experiments that were done in the early to mid 1960s with different psychedelics. The book is called The Varieties of Psychedelic Experience. And in that book as well, there's a bunch of documentation of undeniable instances of telepathy. They set up a bunch of controlled experiments, so much so that the chemicals in the vine were originally called telepamine. Of course, now we refer to them as harmala and harmaline. So that's a little bit of background, a little bit more than I intended to give. But I think that, this anecdote that I'm going to share, it's kind of important to have some background. And so this last trip into the Amazon was the first time that I have drank ayahuasca since I returned to Ecuador and after the unfortunate suicide of my mother. So I was expecting to have to confront a lot, and ultimately I did. So the story is as follows. The first night we arrived in the Amazon, there's a house that we all kind of sleep out on the patio, and we have the ceremony. And the first night went really easy. There was not a lot of fear. I didn't really think about my mom too much. I kind of asked Pachamama, the spirit behind ayahuasca, whether we were going to deal with that or not, and she just said, no, not tonight. It's really just beside the point. I did notice the next day it was a fairly uneventful ayahuasca journey. It wasn't too intense. I didn't feel like I had any major visions or major revelations, but I did know that this feeling of shame and guilt that I had associated with my mother had kind of evaporated to some extent. So the second night, I thought I was free from having to sort of process all of this. And so the way that we work with this particular facilitator when we go to the jungle is we don't eat, we fast for 2 days, and then hike and hike and hike. We went to this beautiful waterfall. There's another video, I think I mentioned it earlier in this video, about that experience. It's a waterfall considered sacred to the Shuar, who are the famous head shrinking tribe of the Amazon. It's actually on their reservation land. So we went on a long and beautiful hike through the jungle, chewing coca and fasting. And then when we return, we drink the medicine for a second time, second day in a row. And this time the medicine was much stronger. And almost immediately I started having very overwhelming visions. At one point I was surrounded by maybe 12 of these spirit beings. I always experience them the same way with ayahuasca. I'm not sure if other people do. I believe so. They move very slowly and they have these sort of characteristic dances that they do. And so surrounded by a group of them as the medicine started to become strong, and the shaman was above us on a kind of a patio singing and shaking his leaf shakers and blowing this perfume down, because this guy, speaking of telepathy, is very, very sensitive to where everyone is, and when the medicine becomes strong, he seems to always be there, sort of, helping to hold the space. And so at one point I remember seeing one of the female spirit beings reached out for my girlfriend, and I saw my girlfriend sit up and reach out for the spirit being, and that's when I realized, wow, we're really on the spirit plane right now. These are not hallucinations. This is, real. Of course, the skeptic could say there are such things as group hallucinations, but I guess you kind of have to be there. If you feel that way, maybe you should come down to the jungle and drink a few cups of ayahuasca yourself. At any rate, so this experience with the spirit beings transpired, and then suddenly the spirit of my mother was present, and all of the spirit beings turned to skeletons and demons, and there were flames everywhere, and once the flames receded, I was ice cold. I just folded up into the fetal position and had a very rough couple of hours just trying to recover from this experience, because part of what I felt like it was communicating with me is that when you die under the circumstances as my mother did, you are kind of trapped in this place of fear and anxiety, and that was kind of a hard pill to swallow. So later I found out I was trying to communicate with my girlfriend, and she wasn't responding. So I knew there was something going on with her too, and eventually I got her to walk out to the jungle with me, and we kind of talked about what was going on, and she said that she had become obsessed with death and had all these visions of aging, and so it sounds like the presence of my mother had deeply impacted her as well. A few minutes later, the facilitator showed up and offered some insight and support. We performed a little ritual to make peace with the spirit of my mother and closed the ceremony. So that's the first of my ayahuasca tales. There'll be a bunch more videos going into some of the details of the experiences I've had with telepathy, and I think it's important too that a lot of people have trouble with the idea that these plant medicines actually put us in touch with the spirit. People might dismiss it as, you're high, or it's just a matter of perception and these aren't real. So probably the next ayahuasca video that I make, I'm going to go into more detail about why I have come to the conclusion that these plant medicines actually legitimately put us in touch with some sort of intelligence that's very ancient and very wise. So please hit the like button, share, subscribe. You can support us on Patreon. There'll be a link in the comments as soon as our profile is approved. And thank you for watching.